So I'm going to introduce Rajia Hassib. She was born and raised in Alexandria, Egypt, moved to the States when she was 23. She holds a bachelor's degree in architecture from the University of Alexandria, Egypt, as well as bachelor's degree and a master's degree in English, both from Marshall. We are? Marshall, thank you. I'm a Marshall alumni. So her first novel, In the Language of Miracles, was published by Viking in August of 2015. In praise of the novel, the New York Times book review stated that In the Language of Miracles was assured and beautifully crafted, adding that Hassib is a natural, graceful writer with keen eye for cultural differences, and that In the Language of Miracles should find a large and eager readership. For the beauty of the writing alone, Hassib deserves it. The novel also received starred reviews from Kirkus Reviews and from Library Journal, which called it a stellar debut. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Rajia Hassib.
So usually, first of all, I want to thank you all again for coming. And I do want to thank Cafe A La Fikr and the Islamic Association of West Virginia for hosting me. This means so much to me. You have no idea how touched and blessed I am and blessed I feel to have such wonderful support from the community and from the religious leadership here. I was not expecting that. I was like publishing the book on the side, and I didn't really ever think that people would be so kind and so welcoming to me in response to that. So I really want to thank you all for this wonderful and warm support and encouragement you've shown me. It means a lot to me. So when I usually give readings, I just read a couple of sections from the book and I talk about it a little bit. But today I'm kind of switching it up a little bit, and I'm going to start with just a 10-minute presentation and then do a shorter reading. And then after that, I'm going to take questions. So we are going to have a Q&A session after that. The reason I'm starting with a presentation is mainly because of the venue we're in, because of the audience, because we're here. And I thought that there are certain things that would need to be addressed, and particularly to kind of expand a little bit on the role of literature and why I think that something like this can hopefully help, and why what I think we all need to do or could do to help. So very short presentation, 10 minutes. And I'm starting with just a quote from the ayah that we started with here, from the verse from the Quran, the idea of knowing one another so that you may know one another, and how I think that this is one way, one very important way to combat hatred and hate on all sides. Okay, so why it's important for people to know us as Muslims, and why it's important for us also to open up to other cultures and to different people. So I'm actually quoting a poll as well, and it's not the same poll, but it has the same outcome, unfortunately, as the one you were talking about. And this is a poll by the Arab American Institute that they conducted in 2014, and it was a poll about American attitudes towards Muslims in general. And they had several findings at the end. I'm only including two, but there were more of them. But the first one says that Arabs and Muslims had the lowest favorable rating among the groups that they asked people about. They polled 1,110 people. They asked them about 9 different groups, religions and ethnicities. So they asked about Roman Catholics, about Presbyterians, born-again Christians, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, Chinese, Arabs, and Muslims, and we came in last. Okay, it's sad, but if we're honest, not very surprising, considering the current climates. The good news, there is good news, is that as you mentioned, not too many people know a Muslim or an Arab personally, but when they do know someone personally, their views change totally. There's a 33% hike in favorability. They like us when they know us better, or at least they trust us, not necessarily like us, because part of the poll was also about would you trust a Muslim or an Arab if they were in public service? And people said, the majority said no. We think that their religion or their ethnicity would influence their decisions. And when they knew someone, all of this reversed and changed. When they knew an Arab or a Muslim, this changed. And also, incidentally, people did not really know the difference between Arabs and Muslims and Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. They assume that Muslim Americans and Arab Americans are the same, and they are not. According to the Arab American Institute, only, I think it's a quarter of Muslim Americans are actually Arabs, and 75%, excuse me?
20%.
20%. So, and only about 1/3 of Arab Americans are Muslims, and the rest are not Muslims. So it was also interesting that people just conflate the categories. So they recommended, of course, common sense. Educate people about Muslims and about Arabs. They need to know more about us. It's common sense. It's not something that it's like groundbreaking, but I'm including the poll because it is evidence, right? It is scientific, statistical evidence that people need to know more about us. The question, though, is, well, they do know something about us, right? They know enough about us to say that they don't trust us. So where is this information coming from? And this leads, I think if we understand a little bit, and I'm going to segue a little bit into something that I studied under literary theory. So bear with me, and I'm not going to go into detail. I'm going to give you just a very superficial idea of what it was about. So if you're an English major here, if anyone is an English major, please forgive me because this is going to be very, very watered down and superficial. But I think it's very helpful, and I think it's important for us as Muslims to just kind of keep this stuff like that in mind. And the idea is that Muslims historically have been portrayed as the other, okay? And otherness, the definition from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is the quality or fact of being different. But it's usually different in a negative way. It's different in less, as in not as trustworthy, not as good. And it's something that it also translates to us versus them all the time. And if you think of us versus them, you can substitute anyone for us. And you will find that many people will think that we are better than them, right? And it doesn't matter who the we are. The we could be the West saying that they are better than the Orient or than the East, and it could be the fundamentalists saying that they are better than the infidels who don't share their religion. There's always someone assuming that he or she is better than the other, and this assumption is always the first step toward acts of hate, usually. You really will not harm people if you think they're exactly like you. But to justify harming others, people often start with kind of making this difference, this distinction. I am better than this person, therefore I have the right to colonize this country. I have the right to commit a terrorist attack, to do so whatever it is that I'm doing. So it's the idea of this dichotomy, this kind of binary of us versus them, gets a little bit disturbing when it is used to justify certain acts. And this has roots in post-colonial literary theory. One of the major figures was a Palestinian-born American professor of literature. His name was Edward Said. He taught literature at Columbia University in Columbia in New York. Very, very respected, famous figure in cultural studies and in literary theory. And he wrote a book called Orientalism and came up with this idea that he was trying to understand the West's attitude toward the Orient, so toward the Middle East and the East, toward Arab countries, toward India, and how this attitude in the 19th and 20th century was used to justify and reinforce colonialism. And from his work, so the idea of Orientalism was the idea that the Orient, the East and the Middle East, was always presented as something exotic, but something that is also different and less, and therefore something that needed the protection of the West, and therefore that kind of justified colonialism. But the reason I'm mentioning this here, because if you think about it, that's the same attitudes that people still have toward Muslims. We've been historically seen as different. We've been made to look different. And if you think about it, this extends up till now because we are being represented, and I'm going to get to that in the next slide. We're being represented by people who is representing us right now, mostly. Violence and in the media, exactly. It is the violence that gets portrayed in the media. So we are, whether we like it or not, the loudest spokespeople for Islam are terrorists right now. Whether we agree with it or not, whether we like it or not, it doesn't matter if we all know that what they are doing is not representative of true Islam. They have the loudest voice. And they get the most coverage because what they're doing is atrocious, and it's violent, and it's horrible, and it's what the media feeds on. So the idea then becomes, it's not like the media is having, I mean, I'm not a big fan of conspiracy theories, so I'm not going to say, oh, the media is doing this on purpose. This is what they get, right? This is the news that they get. It's the violence, and this is what media everywhere feeds on, and this is what's newsworthy. So the question then becomes the question of representation, and this goes back to a huge branch of post-colonial literary theory. Who represents those who are marginalized? Who represents those who do not necessarily speak for themselves? And the important point to take out of that now is self-representation. We need to represent ourselves. We cannot sit back and be upset that the media is portraying us the way it's portraying us if we're not doing something to change that portrayal. So I want to acknowledge that I know I'm preaching to the choir here in some part, because I know, like, our imam, for example, has had this wonderful op-ed published in the Gazette together with a rabbi. They penned it together, and it was just a few weeks back. I know members of our community have regularly contributed to the Gazette, have been on the news. So that's wonderful. But this is, I just want to underscore that this is exactly what we need to do. We need to reclaim our own image, to represent ourselves to people who don't know us, because this is the only way to just like take, or this is one way. It's not like it's going to solve everything, but this is something that we can do. Which is present ourselves to others in a way that is honest. Not necessarily extremely positive, we're not all angels, but at least in an honest way. That way they don't have to kind of rely on the media. And again, this goes back to the poll. When people know us, they have a more favorable attitude toward Muslims in general. So this brings me to my novel. So this is like the short introduction that I wanted to give you all before I started reading. Literature is, I think, a wonderful, wonderful way to get to know people of different ethnic groups and people that we're not personally familiar with. So the idea of reading in general, reading literature, it's not just that we're writing stories. It's kind of a gateway that we can open up for others to know us, and it's a way for us to know others as well. So I hope that my novel helps do this a little bit and helps people learn a little bit about Muslims if they don't know them in person. So about the novel. The novel started as an idea. Again, I graduated from Marshall University. I wanted to be a writer since I was like 7, so it's something that I always wanted to do. So I'm not going to claim that I did this all in order to represent Muslims. I would have written anyway, but it just happened that I have very good subject matter right now, and that people want to know about us. So so the novel started when I was before I started my master's degree, and I was thinking about this idea of apology. And that was in 2010, the year of the Ground Zero Mosque, when, if you all remember, there was this controversy. After 9/11, people were always saying that Muslims are not doing enough to distance themselves from the terrorists. They're not doing enough to show that Islam is a religion of peace. And then a group of Muslims wanted to build a cultural center, an Islamic cultural center in New York City, close to Ground Zero, where people of all faiths would come and kind of engage in interfaith dialogue, which is what we're doing tonight. And the idea got shut down. People got very upset, people got offended, there were demonstrations, and they said, we just don't want you that close to Ground Zero, we don't want you there. So I started thinking about apology, okay, how people want us to apologize, and then when someone tries to do something, they say, no, no, you're doing too much, we don't want you that close, we don't want you in our faces. Because I wanted to write about that, but I didn't want to write about politics, I thought, okay, I'm going to create a microcosm. I'm going to create a small example of what it feels like to be a Muslim in the US post 9/11. So instead of addressing the actual terrorist attacks, I thought of this story of a family whose oldest son commits a horrendous crime and ends up killing, or he ends up dead, and the neighbor's daughter ends up dead as well. And I'm not going to go into details in case you haven't read the book. And this actually, I'm going to also tell you the section I'm reading has a little spoiler, so I'm going to edit it out. So I'm going to skip a few lines, but you're not going to notice it. But I'm trying not to spoil it to people. With that over, I'm just going to read a couple of pages, kind of halfway through the book. And all you need to know to follow what's going on here is that the two people in this first scene are Khalid, who is the younger brother of the boy who committed the crime, and his grandmother, and her name is Ihsan. And Khalid and his family live in New Jersey, and the grandmother is there to visit, and she's spending some time with them. And she is an interesting character who kind of tends to mix religion with superstition a lot. And this is what the section that I'm reading now is going to deal with. So, this is a short scene. They're sitting in the kitchen, and the grandmother just called the grandson and told him, here, come and just have coffee with me. I want you to come and drink some coffee with me. 2 small cups stood in the middle of the breakfast table, filled to the brim with steaming Turkish coffee. Ihsan sat down and reached for hers, started sipping at it as she looked out on the pouring rain. Khalid pulled out a chair and sat across from her, sniffing the rising aroma of dark roast coffee spiced with cardamom. I haven't had this since the last time you were here, he said. She nodded, still looking out the window. He knew she could remember it as well as he did, the way she used to make coffee for him and Hossein, that's his older brother who died, and have them sit down and drink it with her in the mornings. He remembered how bitter the coffee tasted when he first tried it, how its coarse grounds felt like fine sand on his tongue. But he was so happy to be included, so proud he was finally old enough to try the favorite drink of his mother and grandmother, that he did not mind the taste. He even grew to like it by the time she left, not as much as Hossam, who continued making it for himself for months after she was gone. To Khalid, the ritual was always associated with Hossam. He thought that was perhaps why Ihsan had not once made the coffee for him in the months she had been there. It's good coffee, he said, trying to get his thoughts off Hossam. He had sipped at it a bit too eagerly in an attempt to finish it quickly and rush back to his room, and now his tongue burned and prickled. He looked up at her, wondered how come she could slurp the scorching liquid with such ease. She was still looking out the window. Waiting for her to talk, Khalid became aware of the drumming rain, the monotonous sound, soothing. He tried his coffee again, took a small sip, and let it swirl around in his mouth. So, tell me what happened. She turned her empty cup over in its saucer. Khalid swallowed, almost choking on his coffee. He coughed. What? What happened to your brother? Tell me what happened. You know, Sitto, he said. She shook her head. I know what they told me. I want to know what you know, what you saw. Khalid's heart raced and he grew dizzy, seeing her image sway in front of him. He waited for a moment to regain his bearings. She had been here almost a full year, and not once had she talked to him directly of his brother. Why start now? What do you mean? He asked, his voice hoarse. The coffee grains clung to his throat and almost made him gag. How was he the last few months? How did he behave? Your mother used to call and tell me stuff, but I want to hear it from you, she said as she turned her cup upright again, straightening it and looking at the lines the coffee grounds had drawn on the inside surface of the delicate china. Khalid watched her turn the cup around in her hand, hold its inside surface to the light, and look at the lines biting on her lower lip. She was trying to decipher the future, he knew, to read clues from God or angels or someone he didn't know who, someone who knew what was going to happen to her next and who she believed would send her encoded messages. She had done the same with his cup before, as well as Hossam's. Khalid had held Hossam's cup in his hand on the last day she was there 3 years earlier and had stared inside, had seen a dark line squiggled on the side of the cup, its ends bifurcated. I see a snake, Khalid had said. Hossam had snatched the cup from his hand. Let me see. That's my cup, he had said. Then the cup fell to the floor, shattering, just as Hassan hurried to grab it from the fighting boys. For the rest of the day, the last day she had with them, she had followed Khalid around, asking, what did you see exactly? What did you see? He watched her turn the cup in her hands and waited. Her face was contoured with concentration, and for a moment he wished she'd see something good, something bright and happy that would come through just because she said so. What do you see? He asked. Oh, nothing, she said, putting the cup down, the usual stuff, nothing new. Now tell me. I don't know, Sitto, what do you want to know? How was he during the last year or so? Your mother kept complaining about him, but never really told me what he was doing. What happened to him, do you know? Khalid shook his head as if the motion would hurl away the images that came flowing into his mind with her questions. Hossam's calm face as Samir handed him a couple of college applications, followed by his brows knitted in concentration as he sat at his desk and, as soon as his father was out of the room, took a pair of shears and cut each application in hair-thin strips. Then, holding the strips in bunches, cut those again until the bundle of applications turned into a pile of fine strands that he then flushed. Hossam's disappearance into the attic, that space that he had claimed years earlier and that Khalid had envied him, and the onset of unnerving silence. No outbursts of loud music, no crescendos of drum beats. When his grandmother asked what had changed, Khalid remembered the distance in Hossam's eyes whenever he looked at him, a new vacancy behind them that implied anything could now move in. He didn't want to remember, and he loathed talking about his brother. It reminded him of the police interrogations the days after the murder. Did you see anything suspicious? Was he in contact with anyone new? Did he develop any new religious affiliations? Did he pray more often? And of him trying to refrain from asking why on earth they thought it made sense that Hossam did what he did out of religiousness. But he knew better than to question the police, so he just told them all he knew. Almost all he knew. Everything he thought would be relevant anyway. I really don't want to talk about this, Sitto, he murmured, gulping the last of his coffee. His grandmother nodded. I know, Habibi, I know. I didn't mean to open old wounds. She lifted his empty cup and turned it, laying it upside down on its saucer. How do you know what the patterns mean? Khalid asked, nodding toward the upturned cup. My grandmother taught me how to read the coffee grounds. She was famous for her ability to find things out. People eventually grew scared of her, she said, smiling and shaking her head. One time, she read the cup of one of her sons in front of a dozen or so people. They said she looked down, peered inside the cup, and then reached for her slipper and flung it at the poor man, she laughed. She had seen in the pattern that he'd taken a second wife in secret, called him a coward, and he, a grown man, stood shaking, humiliated in front of the entire family. They say women would smuggle their husbands' cups to her after that incident. Was she right about the second wife? Of course she was. But that's more like finding a secret out, right? Not exactly foretelling the future. Hassan shrugged. Sometimes you can do both. But Baba always said it is haram to foretell the future, called it a sin. كَذَبَ الْمُنَجِّمُونَ وَلَوْ صَدَفُوا, he said in slow Arabic. His father had repeated the popular saying so often in his presence that he had memorized it. Fortune tellers lie even if they accidentally tell the truth. Always repeated in association with Ihsan, Khaled now remembered. That saying speaks of reading the stars, like the Arabs of old used to do, not of reading the coffee, Ihsan retorted. She was being literal, Khaled knew, hanging on to her interpretation of one word. He considered saying that just to keep the conversation going and to ensure that she did not speak of Hussam again, but he decided against it. So why do you do it, Sitto? Old habits, she said, taking his cup and peering inside. He fixed his eyes on her face, felt his heart racing. Nonsense, of course. Nonsense and superstition. But didn't you always say there was no way to avoid God's fate? That what was written on the forehead had to be seen? Sometimes, she said, still peering into his cup, turning it toward the light. How come sometimes? You think you can change the future if you see it in that cup? He pointed toward the cup in her hands, but noted his own hand trembling. He put it down, resting it against his thigh. Ihsan put his cup down, sighed, and looked at him. Why are you being so difficult, Habibi? Why is it always questions, questions, questions? Can't you let an old woman have her... I'm not being difficult. See, you won't even let me finish my sentence. I just don't see why you waste your time on this stuff. Ihsan sighed again, shaking her head. Khaled pushed on. What do you think you'd do? I mean, if you looked here and saw that something was about to happen to me, for instance, Ba'd al-Shar, Ihsan retorted, reaching out and grabbing his arm across the table. Relax, Setto, I was just talking hypothetically. But even if you saw something good, anything, what good would it do to know? He looked at her, and she, still holding onto his arm, squeezed it in her hand. He looked down at her fingers and was struck by a sudden vivid memory of her hand brushing aside wet strands of hair that clung to his forehead as he lay sick in bed. Knowing might do no good, she said. But praying could. Praying always helps. And knowing might help you decide what to pray for. So, thank you so much. And I'll take any questions that you have.
I just want to ask, when do you find the time to write?
There is no time. You cannot. There is no time. I kind of juggle things, but I've learned to write anywhere and under any circumstances. So I've written large parts of this novel while my kids were taking tennis lessons, for example, or while waiting in the car while they're here at the mosque, like taking, during Sunday school or something. I just write anywhere and anytime, and it's bits and pieces. So 1 hour here, half an hour there, and it adds up. So
Hello, my name is Fazl Sher. Ali, I don't know anything about Islam being the religion of peace or not. What I do know a little about is Rajia Hassib's craft. And I just want to say a few things about her craft. You might think that writing a book is easy, that she may be naturally gifted, she got a master's in English literature, and the book just was born. And Rajia, I want to talk to you about this in a little bit, but that is not the case. She first learned the rules, and then to write a great book like she has, she had to break the rules. She had to learn about diction in the conversation she wrote. She had to learn about point of view, shifting point of views. She had to learn the craft from the very beginning. And in this competitive environment that the printing industry finds itself in today, for her to have written this book and for the welcome, the recognition that it has received, we have no idea what an immense achievement this is.
Thank you.
And in the process of all those technical rules and I'll just give you one example. Suppose I was to tell us something about what happened yesterday. You would just tell it. Rajia cannot do that. The book would not sell. She cannot tell, she has to show it. And that is what a great book does, and that's what her book does. And just one line, I would like to read one line to show where the kind of incisiveness with the language that she has done, she's utilized and in this book. It's on page 3 at the bottom. She's talking about Khalid, and here's the line. The sun shining through the window behind the illuminated strands of her black hair framed her face in a messy halo. You know, we have all seen this. That's another great thing about great writers. We have all seen that. You've seen a person sitting in front of a window and the sunlight makes it appear like this person has a halo around her. But she puts it down in words and then describes it as a messy halo. So I just want you to understand what a tremendous achievement this is by Rajia. And now finally I do have a question for you. You have complimented and recognized some people in your book at the end. There are two people I want you to tell us a little bit about. Jane Hill, who was your mentor, and also Lynn Nesbitt, who was your agent. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for your kind assessment of my craft. Thank you. I'm flattered and very grateful. Jane Hill is the chair of the English department at Marshall University, and I owe her everything. Okay, this book would not have happened without her. She supported me from the very beginning. She taught me writing. She gave me an independent study during one course. At the time I was studying, I was getting my undergraduate degree, and I was commuting from Logan to Huntington 2 days a week to take my courses, and I had to be back in time to pick my kids up from school. So she knew that it was very difficult for me to get the schedule to work. And from the very beginning, and I didn't know her that well, I had been a student in one of her classes before, because she knew I couldn't take a creative writing class because it was offered in the late afternoons, early evenings. She gave me an independent study, teaching me to write short stories. And she became my mentor after that. After she saw the first thing I wrote, she sat me down in her office and she looked me in the eyes and she said, "You are a writer, and you need to keep on doing this." And she has helped me in everything from that point on. She has pushed me to do better. She has pushed me to write more. She showed me how to submit my writing to papers to get short stories published. I did that, and I got 4 short stories published. She arranged for when I was doing my master's degree, she got me a graduate assistantship there, so I was teaching while I was getting my master's. She set me up with Marie Manella, who's also in my acknowledgements, and she's a wonderful West Virginia writer who was on my thesis committee and who helped me very much through the first 2 drafts of this novel. And eventually, Jane Hill also took the finished novel to her close friend, Ann Beattie, and I didn't know she was close friends with Ann Beattie. Ann Beattie is one of the most respected living American authors. She has published 40-something stories and short stories in The New Yorker, for example, just to give you an idea. And Ann Beattie read the novel and liked it so much that she carried it to Lynn Nesbitt, and that's the second name you've asked me about. Getting a novel published here in the US is a very complicated process, but the first step anyone would need to do is find the literary agent. The literary agent is someone who takes the manuscript from the writer and says, okay, I believe this could be a good book. Now let me talk to publishing houses and see if I can get one of the houses to buy the novel. Just getting the literary agent is a very difficult step because it's very competitive. There are thousands and thousands of writers applying to the same agents and trying to get in. Lynn Nesbitt is a New York-based agent. She is a legend in the industry, in the publishing industry. She is the agent of, among many other people, Jimmy Carter, the former US president. She is the literary agent of Joan Didion, of Jeffrey Eugenides, of Tom Wolfe, of Anne Rice, Ann Beattie as well, like big names. So in short, Lynn Nesbitt is someone who would never have looked at my manuscript twice if I had sent it in the mail, because she doesn't take submissions through the mail. But she looked at it because Ann Beattie carried it to her, and Ann Beattie did that because Jane Hill gave it to her. So once Lynn Nesbitt agreed to represent me, she read the novel and she liked it and she agreed to represent me. And after that, she managed to sell it to Viking, which is an imprint of Penguin, in like 2 weeks, which is unheard of. So a lot of luck and a lot of blessings from God involved to get this to happen, because it wasn't easy. So.
Hello. When I first read your book, I wanted to ask you, why did you write it? What made you write it? But before I could ask this question, you have already answered it. But second thing, the characterization is very beautiful, especially the grandmother. I loved her character and the way you have portrayed it. It reminds me of our grandmothers and when they used to do things to form the character of the next generation. They were good, they were soft, but they were hard as nails when they think it was necessary. This is a beautiful character, but one thing I couldn't understand, I don't know Arabic that way. Many times you have quoted her and there's no translation. I wished many times that in brackets you would have translated it to, it would have made the difference to my knowledge. How could I, but she would say something and I wouldn't understand. But this book is not only for people who know Arabic. English, yes, I know, but not Arabic. So, a humble suggestion, if you could, the next edition, you could do that.
Well, quick answer to a couple of things you said. The Arabic sentences, sometimes I did include a translation, and when I did not, I felt that the context would help you understand the general idea of what she was saying. So yes, so there are different schools of thought on this, but usually the idea is if you can get what is happening without understanding the couple of words, then it's generally okay, and the words are there mainly to remind you that these people are actually not talking in English. I'm writing it in English, but they're not really talking in English.
First of all, I want to say I haven't read the book, but I can hear and I can see there is a big talent there.
Thank you.
You show the story in a very, very nice way. And the topic that you picked is very intelligent and very practical and very real. So I want to just congratulate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's very kind of you.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Monahan, and this is my first time here.
Hi. Thank you for coming.
I was invited by my friend Umla. I have a couple of questions, but a really quick tip about the Arabic translation. There's a really cool app called Word Lens, and you can just put it right over the words, and it's amazing. It just shows you in English or whatever language you set it to show you. So I'm also someone from a Presbyterian household and background, and I'm here because I have the utmost empathy and concern for what's going on with the Syrian refugees and how people here in the United States are being treated, Muslim people in particular right now. I was just wondering if you think it would be interesting, I do, if I were to wear a hijab and walk around and feel my experience of that as an American. You know, I've grown up accustomed to being treated how what I feel is normal. Have you ever had anyone do that and reflect their experience back to you? I feel like my coloring and, you know, my complexion and everything, I mean, I just wondered if maybe that would be an interesting cultural exercise because I have the utmost empathy and I'd like to learn more.
That's one. First of all, thank you for coming, and I'm very glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
And I'll tell you one thing that I did one time. I was giving a talk at Marshall University. I did read of experiments done in colleges in recent months where girls were given a hijab and they would put it on and walk around for the day to have that experience. And I think that's wonderful. But I'll tell you one trick I pulled one time. I was giving a talk at Marshall University, and it was about women in Egypt in general. And I was trying to say that women are the same. We may look different, or people may react differently, particularly to the hijab, but they're all the same. And what I did was, it was on a stage, and there was like a little bit of performance in the whole event. So I was able to get them to dim the lights while I was talking. And then I just did this while the lights were dim, and wrapped it around my head, and then when the lights turned back on, I looked like this, okay? And it was an all-American audience at Marshall University, and my theory was, I bet your attitude towards me now has changed in this 1 second, just because of this. Whereas I'm the same person that I was 1 minute ago before the light dimmed and turned on. And after that presentation, people actually, an older gentleman walked up to me and he said, you know what, I'm ashamed to admit it, but you're absolutely right. The moment I saw the scarf, my attitude, my reaction changed. It is unfortunate, and it is part of the whole stereotype that is associated with Muslims, and it is particularly unfortunate because it is part of freedom, right? People should be free. It is what this country is based upon. People should be free to have their own faith, beliefs, to do what they want to do. And if a woman chooses to cover her hair, she should be free to do so and not get harassed for it. So if you have the courage to try that, I encourage you to try it once and see, just kind of pay attention to how people will look at you. And yeah, and let me know what goes on. I have a website. Look me up and email me and let me know.
All right, yes. I really want to congratulate you.
Thank you.
But I have to say this. Kamal Marzouk got what he wanted. I remember Sulaiman talking to him because Kamal and Sulaiman are like really, really close buddies. And when she finished her master's, Sulaiman told him, oh, you have a professor right here. Oh, Kamal, you should be so proud. And he said, I don't want the professor. I want a writer. I want autograph. That's what he got.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, and you are too kind, Naveed, as usual. Thank you. Thank you.
The question: do you have any background Arabic writing? I mean, when I was listening, I was imagining Najib Mahfouz novels that I read when I was younger. I thought that it's kind of similar style. And I definitely imagined Abdul Halim Hafiz, Tariq Finjan at the same time. So, the top reader or whatever. So do you have any background Arabic writing?
Yes, actually. First of all, I'm very flattered that you're comparing me to Najib Mahfouz, so thank you so much. But I used to write in Arabic. I've been writing ever since I was a kid, on and off. And I wrote in Arabic, and I actually got a couple of short stories published in Egypt when I was in my late teens, early 20s. So I was writing in Arabic up till after we moved here, and then when we moved to US, I continued writing in Arabic, and then at some point, I just made the transition, which is difficult to do because you feel like there are questions of authenticity and of, am I supposed to write in this language or that language? But it came down to a question of audience as well. Like I wanted to address an American audience. I think I had more to say to the American audience than I would have had to say to an Egyptian audience. So I kind of made the switch to English. But yes, I used to write in Arabic before I would.
I would love to read those novels in Arabic.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
First of all, I just wish to thank you for coming tonight and sharing with us your experience. And second, I wish to congratulate you on being successful and expressing your thoughts in current environments. My question to you is, going forward, your past has been good, your present has been good, you published the books. Now, considering from ground zero time, the masjid you refer to, a lot of things have changed, particularly this year. A lot of feelings were deep inside their chest among many Americans. And this year, because of whatever reason we give, extremism, electioneering year, a lot of things against Muslim is coming out. So going forward, do you have any plan or do you have any thoughts to address the current environments and the difficulty Muslim may be facing in this country, like the Jews did? Any comment on that, please?
Yes, of course. Well, thank you. I think the current environment does have a lot to do with Donald Trump and politics, unfortunately. Going forward, I think the one thing that I've learned I'm able to do is stuff like that today. I am working on another novel, so I'm hoping that I'll publish a second novel at some point soon. But I think what I can do, what I've learned that I can do is this: write as honestly as I can about Muslims and give those stories to people, and then do this, like today, and give readings. And I've been doing a lot of those. I've traveled, I've been to Idaho, to Boise State, I've been to several places in West Virginia, I've been to Washington, and I'm trying to travel and talk to people. And I think this is, in my experience, this helps a lot, because honestly, every single reading I've given, I've had people walk up to me at the end and say, we're so glad we got to see you and listen to you talk, because we've never met a Muslim in person before. And I think this is the one thing that I'm very happy that I'm able to offer at this point. And I think it helps that, again, I'm writing fiction, and it is a more approachable medium, and people are more comfortable reading it. So I think I've kind of found the one thing that I can be of service in, and that I'm relatively good at.
Something more to this point.
Yes.
You actually put it in the presentation at the very beginning, which is like self-representation.
Yes.
Each Muslim needs to reach out to his neighbors, to his co-workers, to live the human experience with them, which is the best way of representing ourselves. And in terms of like presenting Islam, alhamdulillah, recently we did have like events like this, and like reaching out to schools and presenting Islam to schools and universities.
Yes.
Self-representation is I would say, is the best way to deal with this Islamophobia for the time being.
I totally agree, yes. And I do agree that this is something that we all can do too, because unfortunately we tend to cluster together and kind of stay with and all minorities do that in all, I think, everywhere. But I think we need to step out of our comfort zone and just reach out to people and talk to people of other faiths and of other cultural backgrounds, and get them to talk to us. So I thank you for the contribution.
Rajia, thank you so much. I'm a priest in the Episcopal Church, and I thank you for the illustration, because I'm going to use that in the pulpit.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
I think that it is it's startling, actually, the change that it has in people's view. And I think we need to be aware of those prejudices, so thank you. I'm going to use that.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that it was helpful. Thank you.
The second thing is, I just purchased your book on Kindle.
Yay!
And the third thing is the point about getting to know people. I did not know this community until March of this past year. Sky Kirshner introduced me to Ali and Dr. Zanabli, and we had a town hall meeting at the church. Then Lynn came to me and said she would like to be involved in the Syrian crisis, And I said, good. Well, so I saw the imam at the Karla meeting, and one of the first people we called was Ali, and we had a big meeting. And then we had October 26th, and a huge crowd came and said, yes, they wanted to be involved. I mean, there were more than 150 people in the church who came and said, yes, we want to help, we want to know more, we want to be a part of this. And then Ali got all of these politicians together, and Friday, yesterday, we had this huge meeting with the religious leaders of Charleston. Getting to know your neighbor is really essential. It is so essential. And we've had this conversation about when people are marginalized, it is hard for them to get voice. And that is the situation that you have been in. And I just want to say there are a lot of people in Charleston who want to support this community to make sure you have the voice you need so that people can know who you are essentially and make the distinction between the true Muslim faith and the radicals. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for this nice novel. There was one question that Dr. Shari asked about the effect of international literature, especially you are from Egypt and about Najib Mahfoud, the Nobel Prize winner. The second thing, what attracts me about the point of Edward Said, he talked also about like we Muslim, or let's say Oriental people are represented by discourse, not language. And discourse, it means a language that's wrapped by politics. So unfortunately, we are not represented by a language, but a political language that have a discourse, that's why. So we shouldn't all the time blame the media, as most people in the community say. There is a lot of things to do on our part, on our ground. So we need to, you know, you are right, we shouldn't be all the time like minorities living together, but we need to do our part.
Yes.
Okay, the second thing, or the last thing, I'm sorry, I'm gonna make it brief. This achievement of this novel, to what extent it encouraged you to work for upcoming work?
Well, thank you, first of all, for your remarks, and I do agree we need to reach out. And I think, I mean, as Marquita has shown, people are willing and eager to kind of communicate with us. So I do believe in the goodness in the human race. It's not that everyone hates us and everybody doesn't like us, it's just that people don't know us. The success of the novel has been extremely encouraging because it was a terrifying thing just having that novel published. I wrote just for myself my whole life. Very, very few people ever read what I wrote. I did not participate in writing groups. I did not go to workshops. I just like worked on my own and I had fun and that was it. So having a novel come out was terrifying. And if people had, you know, kind of hated it, and it was a possibility, obviously, because it is so subjective. People's reaction is subjective. Some people will like it, some people will hate it, and you can't do anything about that. But if it had been different, I'm sure it would have influenced my attitude toward writing. But I'm very grateful that it was received as positively as it was, and it certainly helped me, particularly with confidence, because it is a little bit terrifying to be writing in your second language. I'm not a native English speaker. So it definitely boosted my confidence. At least I know I can write now, which is a wonderful thing.
The first question always they ask that why the women are so oppressed in Islam. So you are a good example of oppression. So if this is the oppression, then we will happily continue that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
I just wanted to say, congratulations for having the book published, and it's really impressive. This is my second experience with the book, attending the reading. Just wanted to say, concerning the reaching out. I just moved from Raleigh, North Carolina 6-7 months ago. And I found it here in West Virginia very welcoming, and I found many more kind and tolerant and good people than I ever thought coming to West Virginia. Just wanted to share that a few weeks ago there was like rumors about an armed rally that would be rallying in front of the mosques at all the states. And I was attending the interfaith monthly meeting with the religious leaders, and I found all of them in one voice saying, we will come over to the mosque during the Friday service and we will be protecting you all. And I said, we don't want to overreact. Then they said, if you get to have anything, just give Sky Krishna a call and he will let us all know. So I would say it's encouraging for us as Muslims to come out of our own conservatism and reach out to our neighbors and extend this self-representation that you have presented.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Any plans for the youth? Any plans to help the youth?
I'm open to anything. I don't know. I have no immediate plans, but I'm open to anything. Yeah.
I have to tell you, Rajia, I read the book twice.
Oh, wow.
And I have very strong feelings about the characters. I think we've talked about this before. I really dislike the father. and I mean, that's a sign of great success that you can actually evoke such great big feelings. But the thing that I want to say that's, to me, is most important, this genre, the genre of the ethnic writers, Arabs, Black, there are very few who write in English. There's a lot of translation, but the translation is not the same. For instance, the Indian subcontinent is largely represented because English is basically their language. But for us, it's so completely different. Therefore, your book is so important because you are writing in such a rarefied, rare genre. That niche is very small. And I am so glad to hear you're writing another book. And there's one other thing I was going to say. For instance, the Algerians speak French. And the French people got to know them because they wrote, not translated, they wrote in their own language. So your niche is so important. And the fact that in addition to it being so important, that you write such a great book that evokes such high emotions, like I dislike the father so much, and I love Ihsan so much, that when I look at my empty coffee pot at home, and I say to myself, shame on you, you only boil eggs in it, you know. But I mean, I just wanted to say this so we realize the importance of what you did. That's quite an accomplishment. And thank you, and I'm looking forward to your second.
Thank you so much.
On pins and needles.
I don't have anybody else.
Okay, so thank you. So this will bring the evening to an end, but maybe with one last question. We normally tend to end the meeting with a message, either a message of hope, a message of action. So in your book, when I read it, there were several messages that were apparent to me. But if you were to pick one message, what would that message be? And would it be different if it's for the Muslims than the Americans, for example?
Tough question. I think if I were to pick one message, it would be for Muslims, and it would be a message of action a little bit. The title, In the Language of Miracles, has to do with what I feel is a problem with our attitude, and that problem is we expect God to solve our problems, and we do nothing to solve them ourselves. We're just sitting there and waiting for a miracle. We feel it's unjust that we've been portrayed this way, and because we are essentially good people, then God will solve everything. And I don't think that's the way it works, even religiously. So I think the one message would be try to do something small. It doesn't have to be, we're not going to change the world, but we can do the self-representation, we can reach out to our neighbors and our friends who are not Muslims, and we can do small acts of kindness maybe. And I think this is the best thing that we can do to show people what true Islam is. They will believe our actions. They will not believe our words. So do something nice.
Thank you. I don't see Wazir. You, sir, I think you're the only one left from the EC here. If you can come and join me. We do have something very small, just as a token of our admiration to you.
Thank you. The evening was enough, and I'm just totally grateful for the evening alone. You don't have.
So this is. There's an artist in town, a local artist, Ernie Downey. He's been an artist for 20, 30 years. So he put this together as from our community to you, and acknowledging your hard work, your success with the novel. It's a play that you can put in your office or at your home, definitely. And hopefully it reminds you with all of us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's so kind. Thank you.
Sister Barazi was supposed to be in my place to give you a hug, but
Thank you so much. I'll get out on Sunday.
So if anybody is still would like to purchase the book, it's available, and if anybody would like to sign it and they have the book, we can do it here, and we can take a picture as well.